Welcome to the September 20th, 2018 Murfreesboro City Council meeting. Councilmember Kurt Wade has our prayer and our pledge.
All right, let us pray. Lord, we just thank you for this day. We thank you for our city of Murfreesboro. First of all, we thank you for our first responders. We thank you for our police officers, our firefighters. We thank you for what they do for our city. Lord, we just ask you to bless North Carolina, the flood victims, protect them and guide them. Lord, we ask you to protect Murfreesboro, protect our schools, and protect our kids. In Jesus Christ's name, amen.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I do want to make two quick comments. This just came up. I don't see Scott Broden back there, so I think this is reliable news, but something just came across. Scott, saying it is reliable news. The DNJ just reported, I think many of us saw a disturbing tweet or Instagram post about Riverdale High School. The student who made that post was arrested, and the online threat was a prank. So anyone who's watching that or watching the city council, please know our law enforcement officers, many who are here, did their job and have found who posted that. I also want to ask Chief Mark Folks if he'll come up before we get into ceremonial items. Many have seen here recently, Mayor Ketron and myself appointed a joint task force to work on emergency service response and medical response inside our community. We had our first meeting on Tuesday, and I really wanted Chief to talk about some of the things we discussed.
Yes, sir. Mayor and members of council, pleasure to be before you tonight. We had a great meeting on Tuesday of the task force. I really appreciate Mayor McFarland and Mayor Ketron for appointing the task force to look at some of the longstanding issues we've had with emergency medical services, which primarily center around lack of communications. I think that was identified Tuesday. And I assure you that we're going to improve the communications aspect. We're looking at several different things there. Myself, the other chiefs with the other municipalities in our county, as well as the director of 911, Steve Smith, and the Rutherford County EMS director, Mike Nunley, are working on some solutions, creating a long-term plan to address the issues with call processing at 911 and things like that are going to be much more sustainable going down the road. Additionally, it's very exciting to announce that it looks like the town of Smyrna and the city of Eagleville are going to follow our lead into first responder services for their community. That was came out of that task force the other day, and we're going to work with them to empower them to be able to provide that for their community if they so wish. And that's another great aspect that came out of that meeting the other day. And it was a very positive meeting, and I appreciate our council support and everything that you've done for us getting to the levels that we're at. I'm very proud of the levels that we are at within the city on emergency response, primarily on EMS calls, but all calls. And it's very encouraging, the meeting that happened the other day.
Absolutely. All right.
Mayor, if you don't care for just a second, I'll take a quick moment to mention our personnel in South Carolina. We have a team over there of 12 from Murfreesboro Fire Rescue, as well as 4 additional personnel that are with a joint team from Rutherford County, Wilson County, Emergency Management, and Lebanon Fire. And they've been performing rescues. They actually extended their deployment on Monday for an additional 9 days. That looks like they won't be coming back till next Wednesday at the earliest. And so they've been doing a lot of, I wouldn't say rescues, but evacuations from homes where a lot of the flooding is occurring in a lot of areas. And so I just, your continued prayers for them as they're over there serving the needs of South Carolina on that EMAC deployment.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chief. Ms. Russell.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Dr. Linda Gilbert nominated a group of school safety and education officers to receive the STARS Award for going above and beyond their job as city employees. This evening, we are awarding the STARS Award to Bryce Robbins, Chris Williams, Larry Maples, Bill Dry, Barbara King, Stephen Luter, Skylar Harris, Austin Ernest, Cole Glass, Matt Vaughn, Philip Taylor, Jay Rosinski, Stan Meeks, Ava Radley, current SSEO Supervisor Sergeant Scott Newberg, and Sergeant Greg Walker, who also supervised the program from 2006 until the spring of 2018. Dr. Gilbert said, although we have only been in school for a couple weeks, I've heard so many comments from principals about how helpful the officers have been. Last week at principals' meeting, I asked each principal, among the many successes of the first week of school, what would you consider the greatest? Of all the possibilities, at least 2 principals responded SSEOs. In addition, the chatter on Facebook has been great. The SSEOs are doing exactly what the council and Murfreesboro citizens had hoped. Not only are they keeping the schools safe, but they are making a difference in the lives of children. They are regularly checking the perimeter and doors of each school, help with arrivals, dismissals, and during the day-to-day transactions, encourage school attendance, train with the school staff regarding restorative practices, cultural competency, and model positive adult-child relationships. They epitomize what it means to create a better quality of life. They are indeed stars of Murfreesboro. Mayor.
I would rather, I think that our emergency service providers, our police officers, our firefighters, I want y'all to know from the council, I don't have words to tell you what we feel about you all, the men and women who represent us. You make us proud every single day. I said the other day that we can give you all the nicest buildings, cars, equipment, but it's each one of y'all who make Murfreesboro the place it is, and we wouldn't be who we are or what we are without each one of you. And so, Dr. Gilbert, I know we'll give you opportunity to.
There are several principals here tonight. If I were to give them a chance to talk, you'd be here till 10 o'clock because they would be able to tell you everything that these citizens do for Murfreesboro. But it has been amazing, the change in the culture of our schools. They are there for whatever we need. And so I want to thank you for supporting them and for funding them. And ladies and gentlemen, you are absolutely wonderful, and every day I hear about the great work you do, and we are blessed to have you here. So thank you so much for what you do. Thank you for acknowledging them.
Thank you. And before Dr. Gilbert leaves, we have one more STARS award that we didn't print, but Dr. Gilbert, I think you recently were named
I got some kind of name, but
yeah. So I don't want to call her a superintendent, but basically, Dr. Gilbert won School Director of the Year award in the state of Tennessee, and then she'll move on now to represent Tennessee nationally. And so I think she's getting recognized for something that we already knew. And so I want to tell you congratulations for what you do for our school system.
thank you. Thank you, Council, for what you do.
And things that we all already knew, Murfreesboro recently, as a matter of fact, day before yesterday in Money Magazine, and one of the reasons that we were named this is for a great school system. Our principals who are here, if y'all stand up, please. Thank you. Our police officers, our firefighters, all of our staff who are here, we were named the 19th best city in the country to live. And so I think that's pretty cool when you see we're getting recognized for things that we're proud of in the hard work that a lot of our staff does. So thank you so much, and y'all are welcome to stay or you're welcome to go. It's totally up to you guys.
Just waved.
Was he saying that to us?
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
You don't think that applies
Tempting
to us?
offer, wasn't it? Tempting.
It didn't apply to us. Oh, okay.
Tempting, very tempting. I like yellow. I ain't yellow. No.
A little different. All right. You now have the consent agenda in front of you. Is there anything that needs to be added or removed from the agenda or consent agenda?
If I don't hear anything, I'll move for an approval. Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wrightfield, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have the meetings or the minutes from the September 6th regular meeting and September 12th regular meeting.
There's no questions, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move into new business, and you have ordinance 18049 to amend Chapter 32 Traffic, Section 32, 1312 Parking Zones to revise the parking limit to 2 hours. First reading, and this is the Transportation Department.
Do we need an explanation or a motion?
Mr. Balchandra.
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. We have before you an ordinance to amend City Code to allow 2-hour parking on the public square. The downtown businesses made the request to Ms. Jennifer Moody, our previous Assistant City Manager, to survey and conduct an analysis to see if we can accommodate and change the 1-hour parking to 2-hour parking in the downtown area. Ms. Moody worked with the Murfreesboro Downtown Business Association and sent out some surveys to the local businesses. And overwhelmingly, there was positive results from the survey wanting this 1-hour parking to be changed to 2 hours in the downtown area. Staff feels that it'll have minimal effect with the addition of the Rutherford County parking garage and our police department's relocation to Highland Avenue. We feel that there will be adequate parking in the downtown area. We also strongly feel that the patrons that visit the downtown area will have additional time without being ticketed to do business in the downtown area and also eat, shop, and conduct business. We recommend approval. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you, Mr. Balchandra. Ordinance 18054, amend 2018-2019 budget, First Amendment, first reading. Ms. Wright.
Mayor, there's 2 items on this particular amendment. One is for a fire grant for some equipment they received. This is a zero impact to fund balance. It'll be revenue and expense of matching amount. Additionally, each year, about this time of the year, we do kind of a housekeeping amendment for community development. At the time we do the budget in June, they don't really know what their carryover will be for their current funding, and then they get their new funding in, which sometimes is also adjusted. So the budget amendment here does have a slight decrease to the use of fund balance of $6,000 based on what we projected their carryover to be from 6/30/18. We do recommend approval.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll move to land use matters. We have a rezoning to approximately 4.9 acres along Old Las Casas Road and Greenland Drive from single-family residential 10 RS10 district and residential multifamily RM16 district to planned unit development district. College Point Center. Rajesh Agrawal is the applicant. 2018-425. Ms. Green.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Our the Planning Commission has sent to you a recommendation to consider a zoning change request for property that's located on the corner of Greenland Drive and Old Las Casas Road. This property is currently zoned RS10, and that's single-family residential district. And actually on the corner is a house that, for any of you that have lived in Murfreesboro for quite a while, you'll recognize as the big white house. It used to be a boarding house, and many college students in the past have lived there. That house has been demolished, and it's no longer there. It currently is under the ownership of the applicant here this evening, Rajesh Agrawal. He also owns some property that's currently zoned RM16, and that's multifamily residential district with a density of 16 dwelling units per acre. So this property is zoned RM16 and RS10. The request is for you to consider changing the zone to PUD, Planned Unit District, because the proposed mix of uses include multifamily residential and a commercial component. The commercial component is mainly on the corner, and you can see that in the program book you have before you that is referred to as College Point Center. This application went before the Planning Commission on August 1st, and they considered the matter after, of course, a public hearing and discussed it at quite some length. I'm going to invite the applicant-elect lectern in just a moment to go over details of the plan, but I did want to point out to you that the Planning Commission did express some concern with the phasing plan in the book. They were concerned that the apartments would be built first and what state the lot on the corner would be left. And the conclusion was that they asked for the book to be amended so that we would require a park-like setting on that corner. I think that was the solution to maybe an unkempt site, which they did not want. So their recommendation from that meeting was that you approve this zoning change request subject to adding that park-like setting, and that has been added. We also would like to take a look at the comprehensive plan and see what's proposed here. And the comprehensive plan identifies this as part of the student village. The student village has a mixed-use type development. We call it urban core, where it has reduced front setbacks, taller buildings, and provides a mixture of uses. And this use, of course, complies with that part of the comprehensive plan. If you have any questions about the application, I am most happy to answer them either before or after the public hearing. As I mentioned, Mr. Clyde Roundtree would like to come up and give you a brief presentation regarding that request. Up now, sir. I'll pull this up.
Thank you, Margaret Ann. Chairman McFarland, Commissioners, my name is Clyde Roundtree, Huddleston Steel Engineering. I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to present to you College Point Center and also congratulate you on the Money Magazine recommendation of the city. I don't live in Murfreesboro, but I've enjoyed being a part of the process of watching Murfreesboro grow. And I know why this city is getting to where it's getting to. And a lot of it has to do with leadership of the planning staff. A lot of it has to do with leadership of City Council and planning commissioners. So congratulations. We at Huddleston Steel feel like we're a part of that too. So it's a neat thing to be a part of. So with that in mind, I'd like to introduce you to College Point Center. This is an exciting project we've been working on for quite a while. It's had a lot of oversight from the staff, and I'm going to consider it one of the more important corners in Murfreesboro. I really feel like that's kind of the nature it's taken on. It's as Margaret Ann said, there's a house there in the past that was really an understated house. It's right on the corner of the university where a lot of people come to football games. And so it's nice to have something that's coming online that's going to be a lot more presentable, a lot better front for the city, and really I just think that whole area is really taking a turn in a way that's going to be really nice to have. So with that in mind, I'll walk you through the program book as quickly as I can, as clear as I can. Let's see here. Is that right? Go ahead and slide number 1. This first slide, there we go. I get full screen, Margaret Ann, just right. Sorry, is it that one? Oh, that's right.
Scoot over just a second.
Yep.
Thank you.
Oh, you gotta go up there. Okay.
And then you can
Just
do
advance
over.
that way. Great, thank you. This is the overall aerial of the site, and as you see, there's some white roofs on the eastern side of the property. Those are apartments currently owned by Mr. Agrawal. To the north is another roof, and that's a retail center, kind of a metal building in essence. And then on the left side, which is to the west, is a new Greenland Wine and Liquor store. and there's some new apartments also to the east or to the west as well. Mr. Agarwal inquired about the homes along Greenland Drive. Those homes are all, except for one, kind of in a rental state, but there's a possibility of those homes actually turning over and becoming a part of a future commercial development. So we're excited about the possibility where this corner can really appear to be in the future. But for now, we have control of that corner where you can basically see the old house, and it's directly across from the new Greenland Wine and Liquor, which is a much more improved building from the old Quicksack. And so we're excited. I got to drive by it tonight, and it does look good. This slide just basically shows you adjacent uses, and as you see, there's a PCD across the street, and that's the Greenland Wine and Liquors, and that was approved a few years ago. And as Margaret Ann mentioned, this is a split zone site, so we have both RM16 and RS10, so we're combining that to be a PCD. Served by Murfreesboro Electric as well as City of Murfreesboro Water and Sewer. And then these are just some of the adjacent uses. As I mentioned, in the top corner, it shows you apartment buildings that are currently they've been around for a few years. Mr. Agarwal owns those. Those are the traditional white brick that he is infamous for. And he is committed to changing those materials with a lot of direction from the city staff. So we'll have some architectural images of what we're proposing. But those are the new apartments along Old Las Casas. All the homes that were on the property there before, they've all been torn down. They were kind of college rental houses, but they're gone now. And then it just shows the intersection of Greenland and Old Las Casas, which is becoming a pretty prominent intersection in the city. This is important only in the fact that it shows you kind of the edge treatments right now currently around the property. There are some existing evergreens that are going to divide our proposed apartments from the existing apartments. Right now it's kind of pasture-like, and it shows you that metal building that's basically on the north end of the property. The proposal is for 4 apartment units, and then, as Margaret Ann mentioned, 1 commercial building on the corner. And so it's a 4.8 acre site. Our unit density is about 19.6 units per acre. And the retail center right now is proposed to be about 6,000 square feet. The caveat to that is parking. We have got 58 spaces provided for that retail center, so that's going to highly dictate the user. Mr. Agarwal is in pursuit of a nice restaurant kind of user, but we won't be able to use the full 6,000 square feet for that use just because we won't be able to park it. So more than likely, if it's a restaurant or a place to eat, it's probably about 5,000 square foot type of place, and a lot of different types of restaurants fit that criteria. So that's the intention. As far as the character of the apartments, some of the things that are really kind of more mantra for our architectural style in Murfreesboro is a variation of materials, and right now those materials are planned to be brick and stone primarily, with some drive-it on the cornices just for architectural detail. And really the key here is the fronts have an undulation to them, that there's some movement, so it's not a big flat tall building. And really working with city staff and working on the appearance of the buildings, this is unique in the fact that these apartments are directly street loaded, which means that the lower level, first level apartments directly address the street, and you can enter the apartments from the street. And that gives it more of a brownstone appearance. That was really the goal, that it felt like it was more of an interactive versus an apartment where typically there's an entrance point to a stairwell and everyone kind of moves through the building in that way. The lower level apartments do have street addressing doors. And the other component that's nice is that those apartments will shield any parking. That was real important from Old Las Casas, that it wouldn't be a parking lot that we'd see from the road. So you can see the parking lot's embedded between the two buildings. The majority of the parking lot is actually on the back portion of the second row of buildings. And so parking will be basically well screened from any sort of public right-of-way. And that was really the objective, to create that kind of streetscape component. This is the elevations for the retail center. And really the boulevard construction's really become the standard in many ways as far as gateway kind of elements, but also that look. So what you get is somewhat of a two-story facade. So not saying that spaces inside the space will be necessarily 2 stories, but we definitely want to have a look of a 2-story structure. So it has a scale that's fitting for that corner. And the Greenland Wine and Liquors has a very similar type of scale. I guess that's the best way to say it. So with that in mind, we have two important facades facing both Old Las Casas and Greenland Drive. And so these are the 2 facades. They'll have same type of materials that'll be consistent with the apartments. but also awning structures, and there'll be signage and lighting that bring in a little bit more of a pedestrian scale to the buildings. There will be some buffer requirements, primarily along the southern portion of the property. And that, like I mentioned before, those are single-family homes that are running along Greenland Drive. The one closest to the retail center is a privately owned home that is lived in by the owner. As you move up the street, those are more rental properties. So, as I mentioned, Mr. Agarwal has been in communication with those owners, hoping to one day purchase those properties and extend more of a commercial strip center type of look along Greenland Drive. Some amenities will be a pavilion in the formal open space, and we do hope if he gets a user that's a restaurant type of user that there'll actually be a little bit of cafe style seating on the outside of the building to kind of bring in that human scale again to the buildings. Margaret had mentioned the phasing. It is Dr. Agarwal's intention to do the whole project at once. He is courting a restaurant potential user for the Phase 2 component, the commercial building, as we speak. No deal has been made yet, so I talked to Mr. Stevenson, who's Mr. Agarwal's kind of owner's rep, and they're in relationship and they're in communication with a potential restaurant user, but they don't have that one suited up yet. And so with that in mind, the addition to the plan was adding green space on that corner. And the qualification for the green space is that it's park-like. And what the intention from Mr. Agarwal and Mr. Stevenson is to grade that property out, seed and straw it, and then plant the buffer that's required along that property line. So there'll be some new planting along that eastern edge where that private home is. And then the issue we're having as far as streetscape, because it'll eventually be under construction, we don't want to do a lot of hardscape elements that'll eventually be torn out as a result of construction. But I think the overall intention is to not make it look like it's a temporary construction site for what's going on, but it actually has a really nice presentation for people coming into the area, going to football games and what have you. So if there's more clarification that's needed, I'll do my best, but right now it's intended to be a graded out green space with lawn primarily, with new landscaping along that buffer, and that's really the extent of it at this point. So with that in mind, that's the conclusion of my presentation, but I'm available for any questions, and if there's any questions after the public hearing, I'll be glad to do my best to answer them.
Mr. Roundtree, real quickly, what do you think the footprint of the corner lot, that area, what does it cover? A half acre, an acre? What do you think it covers?
As far as the building itself?
That whole parcel that would include the parking for that, as well as the.
Rick, it's probably over a half acre, I would say. It's not probably an acre.
Okay.
It's 4.9 total, and I'd just be guessing.
About half acre-ish?
Yeah, I'd say between a half and an acre.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Mr. Roundtree, with the that's probably a question I need to ask staff, so I apologize. I'm okay. I'll ask after the public hearing. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Roundtree. All right. We'll have to hold a public hearing on this. We do ask if you're wanting to speak when we open the public hearing, if you'll come to the podium. If you're wishing to speak for or against, please state your name, state your address. If you'll keep all comments directed to the council, we'll get all those comments answered at the end of the public hearing. If you're representing an individual, which you would be if you're speaking, you get 3 minutes. If you're representing a group, you have 5 minutes. Again, anyone wishing to speak, please come to the podium. Public hearing is open.
Good evening. I'm Ann Boyce, and I live at 1210 Raleigh Court, and I have been there for about 27 years. I'm just a little concerned about the way that the common areas are and the inhabitants. I know sometimes in our area we see a lot of safety issues. We've lost some very prominent young people in our community. I think we all remember Tina Stewart, and I'm just concerned about how the safety will be with this design. That's all I had to say.
Thank you so much. Anyone else? All right, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll need to consider ordinance 18 OZ 50 to rezone an area along Old Las Casas Road and Greenland Drive to Planned Unit Development PUD District, College Point Center, first reading. Screener, I have a quick question. How does this, as far as density, it's 19 units per acre, how does this compare to some of the other units that are in the area?
The other units average about 16 dwelling units per acre. A couple of them are just a little percentage over due to density bonuses, but RM16 and RM12 are the apartments that are in the area. Of course, there's some properties that are developed as single family and as zero lot lines.
Ms. Green, it's kind of hard for us to, I've got that actual page pulled up here, and the reason that I was asking about the footprint of the corner lot is, I don't think it's really accurate to say that it's 19.6 units per acre when you're carving off a half an acre to an acre. That's not going to be, frankly, it's going to be very separate the way they've got it proposed. You've got a buffer in between the properties and all that kind of stuff. So, I just did the quick math after I asked Mr. Roundtree if it's a half acre, that puts the density at 22 units per acre. If it's an acre, it's 26 units per acre. Wouldn't it be more appropriate for us to look at it that way, where we take out the building envelope for the part that's not going to be, as far as us trying to look at how dense it's going to be, we wouldn't take an entire project and use an entire project to base that on. Am I thinking about that correctly?
If they were separate lots, you're right. We wouldn't take other projects, just like you said.
Okay.
It depends on where the zoning lines are.
Well, I'll dive in here. Kind of reading through this the other night, I've made a few phone calls in the last few days to try to get ahead of this a little bit. But, a few things. I've got kind of a list of concerns with this. One of the questions that I have for you is we also didn't see, kind of like we normally see, is kind of a net increase in units. So do we know how big the current RM16?
It's about 2 acres. So
we're going from 32 to 192.
32 to 96. 192
bedrooms. That's right.
Units.
96. Yeah. Okay. So three times more. Yeah. And why did we look at that in terms of bedrooms why did it show up that way for parking?
Originally, when they submitted the application that way, I found it a little odd. Dr. Agarwal, sometimes in the past, I've been here a long time, and in the past he had asked to do these kind of odd rooming houses, which were rejected by Planning Commission. And so I questioned them about the bedrooms, and then they added the number of dwelling units, which is the 96 that you see now.
Yeah.
I think we're concerned about parking because part of the reason we actually, as a city, increased our parking demand is because for this area of town, we find that even though there is some folks say that these people do walk, they do, but we found that multiple people may be in a single bedroom, and so there really is an impact with cars. So we wanted to make sure they can demonstrate they met the parking requirements. They initially asked to have less, and we said we wouldn't consider an application that did not provide our minimum.
Okay. So it says max units, 96 units, parentheses, 2 bedrooms. That doesn't necessarily mean that's what's in the plan book. It just says that's what's maximum. And it doesn't mean that's what it's going to be, or does it?
They could do fewer than 96 units if the unit has, say, 4 bedrooms in it. Their number of units would go down at that point. But the zoning ordinance requires a maximum unit to be put in any planned development. So that's why I requested that. They put that 96 on there. I suspect that their intention is probably to have rooms that are probably more than 2 units, maybe where it's the 4 units per dwelling unit and they share a kitchen. And that's generally what you have for student living.
So we'd have an apartment with 4 bedrooms in it?
It's possible. The number of units will not exceed 96, and the bedrooms will not exceed 196 in however form that comes back.
Okay.
It is confusing.
One of the big ones, and based on what Ms. Boyce said, is kind of the safety features. I think I've learned that the applicant has been on the front end of our accreditation program, and that's great. There's I don't know the word for it, the CEPTED or something, whatever the right acronym is, but whatever the accreditation process is for safe housing, do we know, does this have all the lighting, the gates, all the stuff that we've talked about, making sure the cameras, does this have all this in the plan book somewhere? Or?
I don't know. That information's not in the plan book. The lighting information's not in there, just the fact that they will meet our lighting standards. It's not proposed to be a gated community, and I actually am not familiar with all the standards in the acronym that you just mentioned. So I don't know how it relates to that, but those elements that you just mentioned are not in this plan book.
Okay. Well, I know it's kind of new, but, look, I think part of the reason that we all decided or talked about going to PUD for multifamily was so that we could address these things at this time. I mean, and if that hasn't been addressed, I mean, this is one of the things that would lead me towards my thoughts on this particular project would to be to, at the very least, defer it till we figure that out. So a couple other things, I'll just sort of look, I mean, the other things that are on my mind on this is the uncertainty of that corner lot. I mean, I read the minutes and got as much out of that as I could, but the fact of we don't know the timing on what's going to happen there. We don't know what the parking is going to look like. We don't know what the building is going to look like. We don't know who's going to be in the building or even what kind of business it is. It kind of defies the whole reason for it to be a PUD for me. And that, as Mr. Roundtree said, is going to be a really important corner, because hopefully this is going to set the tone. So that, along with the, whether or not having 26 units per acre in an area that is already substantially dense and in an area where we have had a higher than average crime rate, would lead me to not support this as it is right now. I guess I should say we might get some answers on the safe housing accreditation stuff if it is. I mean, I just don't know the answer to that. So at this point, I just wouldn't be really willing to go into it. The other thing I want to mention, and I just want to get this out on the table for all of us and for the public too, is, I think this particular project for me sort of stimulated the need for us to have a plan with MTSU as it relates to what's the big picture, and how are we going to address housing needs for students? Are they going to address some of them, or I say they and we? You understand the difference. I mean, there are boundaries, physical boundaries, or is that just something that we are going to be dealing with? And there's been some discussions I know a couple years ago, but it sort of has, was never gotten to our level to where I think, it probably is a good idea for us to know what that plan looks like and know, things like if there's going to be a property like this. And this is only me speaking, so it's, the council has their ideas too, the other members. But for me, it would be a prerequisite that safe housing stuff is answered way before it gets to us. My opinion only on that, but that should be that should just be a prerequisite for this to even be a possibility, particularly for young students. But anyway, that may be on the way and happening. Yeah. So. Anyway, that's my thoughts on this, and so I just want to get that out there and at least let everyone know kind of where my concerns were.
Council member, we have just completed, I believe, the development of the safe housing program, and we are integrating that with our development services. So, but that's still in the process. But I agree that there's enough in the safe housing program that we can certainly apply it. It's really just a process now, and so Ms. Green not being familiar with those is not unusual, certainly, because it does take a little time to integrate those, but we are going about that right now.
Well, the density, the unknowns on the corner lot, the unknowns on whether or not it has the lighting and the safety features that I think we all think are appropriate, particularly for student housing, are all reason that I wouldn't support it as it is. I'm not, in any means going to make a motion to deny it or anything like that. I'd certainly be open to deferral. That's where I stand on it, okay?
I just got a couple quick comments. One of the things that popped out studying this and really talking about more of a mixed use, which this is more of a mixed use, but it highlighted with what we're dealing on parking. I sent this to Mr. Whitaker and Mr. Huddleston, and I think Mr. Tyndall had the opportunity a couple of weeks ago, I went to Boom Ba's Pizza that opened up. So we went on a Friday night, and I'm walking through the parking lot, and you've got those 2 units there, and in that entire complex, there's 2 parking spots, and they still have 5 units to lease. So when I look at, in the model for restaurants has changed. You don't see a lot of single-site restaurants anymore. The majority of restaurants are going into strip centers now, and that's really with the market with fast casual. I get that. But, a complex that still has roughly 7,500 square feet in a 20,000 square foot complex or 25,000 square foot complex that's already overloaded on parking, and there's still 5 spots to lease out. That immediately reminded me of this spot, because you've got 5,000 square feet, you've got 32 spots or 33 spots that are adjacent to this commercial complex, expecting that everyone else who goes to this 5,000 square foot complex is going to park inside the rest of the apartment complex to use that for parking, and that's just not going to happen. It's going to end up just like the Boulevard, where the Boulevard is a great space to go, but at peak hours, there's no parking. You end up having to park on the street up and down to find a spot. So I get the mixed-use development, but we really are going to have to find a way that if you're going to have a commercial portion that's inside that mixed use, the parking is going to have to be able to take into account what we're currently dealing with. The second thing, it's no secret some of the crime issues that we're having or working on diligently around MTSU. Part of that has to talk with Dr. McPhee this afternoon specifically about this project, and I think that he is absolutely committed to being part of the solution. But universities in Tennessee are just not building a lot of student housing anymore. And so, MTSU is a extremely safe campus, but when you push the density off campus to these complexes that cannot solely just rent to students, and they're as dense as they are, we end up with some of the issues we're having. So, going on that, my opinion, if someone comes and wants to do a complex where they have the open concept with individual rooms off, that's where our problem is. We've got 220 units in a development, but then in those 220 units, you've got 4 individual leases in each individual unit. So you don't just have 220 units, you got 880 units. So in this, I'm not saying that's the case in this, but for me to support something like this, it's going to have to be on the forefront when you're bringing through a PRD on what you're going to do on security, how you're going to monitor your development. If you're going to get the density, we need to see security plans in place, how you're going to have controlled parking, how you're going to be able to monitor on-site and off-site visitors. And I think as a council, again, my opinion, approving something without those details just leads us going down the path that we're already trying to fix. And trying to go back and undo what happened 20 years ago is really hard to do. So I think there's a lot that needs to be addressed on the multifamily side and the commercial side before it'd be something that I would be supportive of.
That's the security. Is the density something that concerns you as well?
Yeah, all of these complexes, we don't, and I don't want to say the violent issues that we've been having are clearly in our most dense complexes. When you look at the crime data and you look at even what happened 2 weeks ago at that complex, that is absolutely the most dense complex that we have in the area. So it's clear that the more dense that we make the areas around the university, we're going to be dealing with those issues. So if the density is going to come in place, then you better have a plan in place to show exactly how you're going to deal with it. I wish that in the PRD that the applicant could come and deed restrict the property to say that they're only leasing to students. That's what we keep hearing from the complexes, that, well, fair housing law, we have to lease to everyone. Well, in my point, if you're going to do that, well, then change your name from student quarters or university whatever it is, and don't advertise that it's a student complex if you're gonna lease to everybody. So there's got to be some way legally that these owners can come through and say, if we can age restrict apartments or we can age restrict different developments, there's got to be a way that you can student restrict them. That's where the issues are coming. It's not necessarily all students, but when you mix students with someone who's not a student, and that student is there for a specific person or purpose, but obviously the person who's not a student has different priorities, well, then that's where we're seeing the problems. So that's another thing I'd like to see, if there's a way that the applicant could work through that.
Common sense goes to that too when you think about the crime levels on campus versus across the street. When everybody's a student in the dorm, everybody is responsible for more than just what the police may say, but also what the school says. And once you cross the street and that mixture happens, I think it's easy for us to look at. We've all seen the heat maps of where this stuff is occurring. It looks pretty plain to me. So anyway, I won't say more.
And the other part too, these complexes that, I lived just down the road from this on Old Las Casas Highway in Center Point Apartments when I was in school. But you also have to take into account, right back behind this, you've got some of the oldest neighborhoods in Murfreesboro that are still phenomenal neighborhoods. You've got Scotland Chase back there. You've got Scotland Acres that's back there. So we've got to figure out, if we're going to bring the density, more dense than what we are, how we mesh all that together.
And a school.
Yeah.
And an elementary school.
I think I'd like to also, maybe as a planning department, we can revisit the comprehensive plan, because what I love this conversation because, of course, you set the priorities for planning, and I'm thinking from what you're saying that the density proposed in this plan is not something we're comfortable with. 70 dwelling units an acre sounds like it's way more than what I'm hearing. So maybe the student village concept, we can revisit that and help define something in addition to talking about the security issues.
Well, we've got apartment complexes that are dense that we don't have as many issues with, but there's a lot of factors that go with those complexes that, we've got a development that just opened on East Main Street across from Far East a couple of years ago. And, they've gone above and beyond to handle security. They talked about barcode scanning with the people who are on site every 2 hours or going through on different. So, there's ways to be able to address that. And we have very little issues in that complex. But what happens, and this is what you can tell I'm passionate about this because we've dealt with this. We sat upstairs a year ago. A lot of these complexes, and I'm not saying it's Dr. Agarwal that does this, these complexes get leased to 95% and then they're flipped. And so some out-of-state REIT owns these complexes, and we end up trying to deal with vacant landlords on a complex that's causing issues in Murfreesboro. So anything around the campus, I would say from staff, if you've got someone coming that's bringing student housing or dense developments coming to campus, they just need to be prepared for these questions, because we know that we've been dealing with it for the last couple of years, and with the growth of the university and the growth of the multifamily, we're still going to deal with it. So,
yeah, I'll follow up on what they're saying. First, let me be the positive guy up here. Tearing down the house off the corner, I ride past this property at least half a dozen times a day. Tearing that house down improved the property no matter what goes there, because truly it had gotten to be about as bad an eyesore as you could possibly have. And with that being one of the main entrances and exits from the university when people come to town who aren't familiar with Murfreesboro and visit the Floyd Stadium and Murphy Center, when people visit that facility, the first thing they would see when they would leave that parking lot would be this corner. And this corner has been renovated 50% already, because the new liquor store that's on the corner there looks phenomenal compared to what the old Kwiksak did.
Thank you.
The thing that concerns me is the fact of this two-phase part of the project as much as anything that's in it, because as important as the project cleaning up the corner has been, the intention is to develop it as a commercial zone. from there all the way back up to Middle Tennessee Boulevard needs to be improved. And if we're going to do that, we don't need to build the apartments and then wait for the retail, because the retail is what we're really wanting there. I personally think that that's the most important part of this entire project. And to turn it into a park-like setting, I don't think is a good idea, because we don't want this corner to just be a hangout. Also, we need to make sure that whatever's presented there, whether it be part of the safe housing program or whether it be just in the plans, tell us that we're assured that there will be cameras on site, that there will be on-site security, because these are the things that we encounter when I did a ride around with some police officers the other night, and you know, it was interesting pulling into an apartment complex, and truthfully, the only thing that helped us identify who the bad guys were and the good guys were the guys who were there, who were the on-site security at this particular apartment complex. So it is very advantageous for us to be able to communicate with somebody who's on site when our police officers arrive. If there is an event, it's very important that we make sure that we understand quickly who the threat is, and so that we can maintain as much civility as we possibly can on this property. I agree with Rick in the sense that the density level is being pushed to the extreme. I think the plus to the property is we all know that if it winds up being a pizza parlor on the corner there, some people would probably take advantage of the Greenland Drive parking lot, because there is a huge parking property adjacent, opposite corner of this. So I think that, you know, if I were there and the parking lot was full, that's probably where I would retreat to. It's not like you would have to park on Greenland or park on Old Lascassas. But I think there's still some work to be done here, and I personally don't want to see us turn the project down, but I personally think that it would be advantageous to everybody involved to defer this project until some more consideration has been given to what's actually being proposed.
I'll make that in a motion. You want to make it a motion to defer it?
I move to defer.
Second.
Any other discussion? All right, you have a motion second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you, Ms.
Thank you.
Green. We'll now move to plan of services and annexation for approximately 3.2 acres along Spring Cove Drive in Tomby Court. Christopher and Karen Yongi are the applicants. Ms. Tomlin.
Good evening. This is a annexation of a single property on Spring Cove Drive. Then there are two segments of Spring Cove Drive right-of-way, as well as a section of Tomby Court right-of-way that we're asking to annex. The applicant came in, and Mr. and Mrs. Young are at 4734 Spring Cove Drive. Their septic tank is failing, so they want to get annexed into the city so they can connect to the city sewer. Our department pulled in the Tomby Court section because all of the residents that are on Tomby Court, that's actually within the city, but this right-of-way wasn't. So we have a plan of services here. This is no additional cost, but we do need to hold a public hearing on this matter.
Thank you, Ms. Tomlin. All right, we'll need to hold a public hearing for the plan of services and the annexation. So this is the plan of services and the annexation. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing, and we'll consider Resolution 18R PS 51 to adopt the plan of services.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright?
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider Resolution 18R A51 to adopt the annexation.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright will call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Mr. Michon? We have one more reading, but if you're not here at the next reading, welcome to the city of Murfreesboro.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to items. Ms. Wright, we'll see you on the, no, just kidding. We'll move to item 17 to rezone approximately 4.5 acres from single-family attached zero lot line RSA2 Type 1 district to Park P district and approximately 13 acres from single-family residential 15 RS15 district to Park P district located along New Salem Highway and Warrior Drive. Mark Pirtle Gateway LLC and City of Murfreesboro are the applicants. Ms. Rush.
Good evening, Council. Mayor McFarland. The zoning is for approximately 17 and a half acres. It's to be rezoned from single-family residential attached zero lot line to park, and also an approximately 13 acres to be rezoned from RS15 single-family residential also to park. The property owners are the City of Murfreesboro and Mark Pirtle Gateway LLC. The property owner, Mark Pirtle Gateway LLC, is donating approximately 13-acre parcel to the City of Murfreesboro to be used as a public park. This parcel contains what is commonly known as Farmers Lake. The other 3 parcels are developed with the Stones River Greenway. All 4 parcels are located in the floodway of the West Fork of the Stones River. The adjacent zoning includes highway commercial to the north, multifamily residential and single-family residential to the east, single-family residential attached zero lot line to the south, and then the unincorporated Rutherford County single-family residential to the west. Adjacent land uses are residential, single-family. There is a property to the north that would be developed with a commercial use, the Dunkin' Donut shop. Future land use map of Murfreesboro 2035 Comprehensive Plan indicates that park is the most appropriate land use for the subject property. Therefore, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the 2035 Comprehensive Plan. The Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of the rezoning by a vote of 5-0, and staff recommends that the council conduct a public hearing to pass and adopt the ordinance establishing the requested rezoning. This concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Rush. All right, we'll need to hold a public hearing. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this rezoning request, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and we'll consider Ordinance 18OZ52 to rezone an area along New Salem Highway and Warrior Drive to Park P District, first reading. No questions, move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright will call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll move to item 18, zoning ordinance amendments pertaining to responsibility of the Water Resources Board, Development Services Division, and Public Works Division. Mr. Anthony.
Good evening. You're getting to hear from almost the entire planning department. Great.
Awesome.
I'll make mine quick. Over the last few weeks, city government has seen several structural changes implemented. We're very excited about these. They include creating a Development Services Division, which encompasses the planning department and the building and codes departments, and then certain engineering and urban environmental functions as well. The Public Works Division, which encompasses engineering, urban environmental, and transportation departments. And we've also, over the last few months, seen the change of the name of the Water and Sewer Department and Water and Sewer Board to Water Resources Department and Board, respectively. This zoning ordinance amendment reflects all of those changes by updating department, division, and board names and reassigning certain department-related responsibilities. In many cases, these are changes from one individual, such as the city engineer or city horticulturalist or a specific department, to one of the new divisions, specifically Development Services and Public Works. City administration and our legal department have spent quite a bit of time crafting this ordinance revision and making sure that it encompasses all of the necessary changes, and we think that we do have everything here for you. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on August 1st and unanimously voted to send this forward to you with a favorable recommendation. Staff can answer any questions that you may have.
All right, we'll need to conduct a public hearing for these ordinance changes. Anyone wishing to speak for or against, please come to the podium. All right, seeing none, we'll need to consider Ordinance 18053 to amend Murfreesboro City Code Appendix A zoning Section 7, 9, 24, 26, 27, 31, and Chart 1 endnotes by globally changing references to the Murfreesboro Water and Sewer Board and Water and Sewer Board, respectively, to the Murfreesboro Water Resources Department and Water Resources Board. Number 2, changing certain references to the City Engineer and the Development Services Division of Development Services Director. And 3, changing certain references to the City Horticulturalist and Urban Environmental Department to Development Services Division and Public Works Division. First reading. Could you say that again?
Second.
Motion and second.
Who was the second?
Second was Ronnie, and
I made the motion.
Kurt made the motion. You'll call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now consider Planning Commission recommendations to schedule public hearings. And after I read that, Mr. Blum, I'm going to let you read everything
Sure,
else.
sure. And proud to be the 5th member of the Planning Department speaking tonight. So Planning Commission recommendations are to schedule public hearings for the following items. The annexation plan of services and annexation petition for approximately 39.9 acres along Manson Pike and Manson Court. Zoning for approximately 39.9 acres along Manson Pike and Manson Court to PUD simultaneous with annexation. Amending approximately 33.3 acres in the General's Landing PRD along West Thompson Lane. Rezoning approximately 204 acres south of John Bragg Highway to RSA Type 2, 26 acres, RS6, 140 acres, RS10, 38 acres, and finally rezoning approximately 29.44 acres along Buffalo River Drive to PRD, the Gardens at Three Rivers PRD, and amending the existing Gardens at Three Rivers PRD. The Planning Commission conducted public hearings on these matters on September 5th and was able to handle them all in one night. Staff would recommend a public hearing date of November 1st for these 5 public hearings. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
The only thing that would have made it any better is if Margaret Ann had done it. I'm sure you had her approval. I move that we schedule the public hearings for November 1st.
Second.
We have a motion and a second.
Are we talking about November?
Talking about practice? All right, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Wright, if you'll call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right. We'll move on to item 20, signal maintenance contract for TDOT with TDOT for the I-24 Smart Corridor project. Mr. Kerr.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the council. We all recognize the need to improve traffic flow between Murfreesboro and Nashville. Tonight, TDOT will introduce to council the I-24 Smart Corridor project that will demonstrate a new way to improve our transportation system with integrated corridor management. This is a relatively new concept for defining and delivering transportation projects that will extend the life and value of our existing resources while leveraging new technologies. To effectively create a truly integrated transportation corridor, TDOT has placed a priority on collaboration with each community the project will serve. Collaboration was established early and carried throughout the planning and design of the needed improvements and will continue through construction and deployment. I believe Mr. Shacklet was involved in one of our collaboration meetings. Through this process, TDOT has worked with us to understand the needs of our community and how they how they can be met as an integral part of the overall system, which will be summarized for you tonight. We have with us tonight Mr. Matt Godey and Stan King with HDR, who are representatives of one of TDOT's consulting firms, and we're going to do a short presentation, an overview of the project, and I'd like to turn it over to Stan. Here we go, right.
Thank you, Jim. Mayor, Council, appreciate this opportunity to present on behalf of TDOT this exciting and important project for I-24. As Jim mentioned, I'm Stan King with HDR Engineering. We're the design consultants for TDOT on this project. This is a special project. You'll see some details that Matt will present here in a moment, but as Jim mentioned, the process is also very special with a lot of collaboration. For that to work, the communities that are going to benefit from this project need to be engaged, and I think it's important that you know that the Transportation Department here with the city has really stepped up to that call, been very supportive, provided a lot of information and ideas for solutions too. And so for that, as a team member of the project and as a resident of the city, I could say that it's very much appreciated. And Matt, talk about the project.
Thanks, Stan. Not quite as tall as he is. Good evening. I'm Matt Godey. I serve as the project manager for the Smart Corridor for the design and help with our the planning efforts. So to kind of take you into it, we're going to go briefly over what the project's about, what we're looking at in the near term, which are the things that, if you may or may not know, are going into construction here very shortly, and then kind of look forward to see what we're going to be looking at in terms of future deployments. The picture in the bottom right I thought would be appropriate because that's really what this project is all about. You have a stretch down from Murfreesboro, South Church Street, all the way up to I-440. That was the project limits. It's not uncommon on a daily basis. You have no clue how long it's going to take you to get from Murfreesboro up to Nashville. One of the funniest anecdotes I remember is that Murfreesboro was coming up into Nashville for a meeting. They got there 45 minutes early, and kind of, why are you here so early? Well, we didn't know. We didn't know how long it was going to take us to get there. So that kind of stuck with me. But that's actually what this project's about. It's about trying to improve the reliability. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be getting there faster. It just means that that time from A to B is going to be more consistent. Allow you and everyone else to plan their day around that with better certainty. The way it was busted out, we're looking at 3 phases of deployments: short, intermediate, and long. We'll go over the intermediate and long here in a little bit, but we'll focus on the short term. And it actually envelops not only the interstate, but it also focuses on State Route 1 and all the connecting roadways between I-24 and State Route 1. So getting into the short-term deployments, to me, these things, they were what we'd deemed to be low-hanging fruit, things that we felt like would yield some sort of benefit or be beneficial to the project moving forward, and they fell into 3 categories. The first one, laying the groundwork for anything future. Looking at adding some fiber, which is what the selective gap closure is. Arterial signal system upgrade. We looked at adding newer, more advanced technology into your signal cabinets here. Looking at dedicated short-range communication, things that would allow us to basically take advantage of some of the stuff that's coming down the line. You guys hear about connected vehicles, things of that. That would be able to push safety messages, signal phasing messages, things like that to those vehicles. Another thing, operational benefits. These are things you would probably more readily see. Looking at maybe extending some acceleration and deceleration lanes. Those are specific to a lot of the entrance and exit ramps kind of on the northern end of the project. Looking at adding in additional dynamic message signs. Getting out better communication to the traveling public on the interstate before they have to make a decision whether to get off now and go use State Route 1 or it's okay to continue up I-24. The emergency refuge pull-offs, those are things that basically the shoulder gets widened And I don't know about you, but if you have a car on the shoulder that's stalled, you tend to want to slow down if you're in that lane right next to it. Well, with this pull-off, you'd be able to pull them off, get 12 foot of separation. Therefore, it would kind of eliminate that shock wave that you would see, because every time you hit your brakes, the brake lights are always going to go back and go upstream. Some other things that we'll be looking at are some processes. Incentivized towing, that deals with basically getting tow trucks out there quicker to go ahead and clear incidents. Again, keep your shoulders clean, minimize the times your lanes are closed. Looking at ways we can actually better improve incident management. I think I heard your emergency service chief discussing that. That's something else that we're entertaining with this, with emergency services. And then also looking at additional procedures, maybe looking at better flush plans for major incidents, things of that nature, things that are a little bit more, I guess, kind of catastrophic events. How would we address this? What's the most efficient way? And how can we best serve the volume that this roadway takes on a daily basis? Now, I mentioned that there was some of these deployments will be going into construction. This project started July 2017. We went ahead and submitted plans July 2018. So it was 1 year from the first kickoff meeting to basically getting the plans in for letting. So it was very fast. Jim and Stan both alluded to a lot of coordination and collaboration, not only between the divisions at TDOT, but also between the other stakeholders, the cities. Being the guy that led the design, I can tell you that your staff, everybody, they did a wonderful job. Ram got his techs out there to help me look at every one of your cabinets. Jim did a good job of making sure we got all the information we needed. So that's definitely a credit to the people you have supporting you on a daily basis. But through that, we were able to get that. We were able to accelerate the delivery. And as you can see, these are the ones that we're actually looking at doing, with mainly a lot of the stuff on the interstate, and definitely, obviously, for Murfreesboro specific, looking at trying to go ahead and getting our improved technologies within your signal cabinets and start trying to lay the groundwork for full connection. We have a few things in the short term, so we have to kind of clean up, and we're looking to basically roll that out hopefully before the end of the year. We're looking at some sort of an expedited towing system. That's something that we're working through THP with, also with Metro Nashville Police Department. Those are basically the two biggest people we have to deal with on the interstate. And then also TDOT has to figure into that with their operations division. Traffic signal coordination, this is something, again, we're trying to get the plans developed. We've isolated a few spots along the corridors that we think would be beneficial by looking at the speed data. But again, that's something that has to be developed and has to be brought back to the stakeholders just to make sure that everybody's comfortable with it before that actually went in the ground. And the other two, the incident management and the traffic signal management procedures, those are things that are just more, like I said, more catastrophic long-term procedural things that we're trying to get in place. Public relations, this is something community relations will be dealing with. I know that they're going to try to get with the cities and the stakeholders. That's something that's kind of just starting up, and then more will be coming on that. For future deployments, again, we had intermediate and long-term. I give you the time ranges there. The next phase that we're looking at, going ahead and finish laying in all the fiber so that we've got a good nervous system set up, so we've got good communication network between all the cities and TDOT's TMC. Potentially looking at some ramp metering. That's going to be carefully vetted to make sure that we don't muck up any arterials any worse than they already are. Overhead DMS, I don't know if you guys have ever been to it, but you can see something in the bottom right. It's kind of hard to see in the distance, but right there, basically having one DMS, it's almost like lane control, one per lane, that would give you an idea of running speeds. Maybe this lane is blocked a mile ahead. Again, it's just more information that we can push out to the motorist to let them make a more informed decision to hopefully keep things flowing. And with that, I'll open it up to any questions you guys might have. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Hey, Matt, one quick question referring to, you used a term that went way over my head, the dedicated short-range communications. Is that done through billboard communication, or is it?
No, sir, it's not. DSRC rolls off the tongue a little bit better. But what it would do is it's basically a device that you would put up. Generally, what we're looking at for your situation is they would be put at each signalized intersection. And it literally would actually, and this is mainly meant for connected vehicles that would have the on-board unit. And as you know, a lot of vehicles, I think by 2025, you're going to start seeing a much higher penetration. They'll have these units in there that basically they'll be able to receive the messages from the DSRC, and then they'll be able to push out certain messages, like maybe there's some sort of a safety message like wreck 1 mile ahead. In normal conditions, it may say, hey, the light's about to turn red in 10 seconds, so get prepared for that. It'll be able to push out this stuff. It'll just it'll keep the motorists more informed, things of that nature.
Okay, so when I'm riding down the road listening to the Good Neighbor station, all of a sudden I'm going to get some information about what's going to happen to the road in front of me. That's phenomenal. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
So we have before you a signal maintenance agreement with TDOT for the I-24 Smart Corridor project. Staff recommends approval of this contract. A little background, on December 14, 2017, City Council authorized the execution of the project charter and resolution of support for the I-24 Smart Corridor project, Resolution 17-R-30 with TDOT. The project is included in the Nashville Area MPO's 2017-2020 Transportation Improvement Plan and provides over $750,000 in updated signal equipment for the City of Murfreesboro. Kind of gone through the project limits. Council priorities served are safe and livable neighborhoods and a strong and sustainable financial and economic health. And with that being said, I will answer any questions. Ongoing maintenance costs will be budgeted as we move along. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Kerr?
I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Thank you very much. Thank you for the informative presentation. All right, Mr. Kerr, I think we have a TDOT 2018 Multimodal Access Grant application for the Clark Boulevard Sidewalk Project.
Yes, sir. I think I had that stuck in different locations, but okay. The primary project scope entails construction of approximately 6,160 feet, or approximately 1.17 miles of sidewalk along the south side of Clark Boulevard, State Route 96, between Memorial Boulevard and New Lascassas Highway, to provide a linear pedestrian path along Clark Boulevard. The staff recommends approval to submit a TDOT 2018 Access Grant application for this project. The Multimodal Access Grant is a reimbursable program. Local governments are required to pay the 100% up front of the project invoices prior to seeking reimbursement of 95% from the state. So it's a 95-5 match. Little background information: on July 5th, 2018, staff submitted an abstract as required by the MPO for the Clark Boulevard Sidewalk Project. After the abstracts were reviewed by the MPO, the Clark Boulevard project was shortlisted as a candidate to submit a grant application. The application is due September 28th. Council priority served, safe and livable neighborhoods, and strong and sustainable financial and economic health. As I said before, the project consists of 5-foot sidewalks on the south side of the Clark Boulevard between Memorial and New Lascassas. In addition to the linear construction, the project will entail inclusion of pedestrian-friendly elements for crossing Clark Boulevard through construction of pedestrian-friendly elements at 3 existing signalized intersections, and anticipated through planning levels of estimating that the project could be designed and constructed for approximately $900,000 to $1 million. With a 95.5, that we're looking at about a 5% match, approximately $45,000. I'm available for any questions.
I can't imagine a better price. I wish we'd done
It's
this.
an application, it's a competitive grant.
Competitive grant.
That's-
This is
that's-
like the Mercury, same thing.
Yes,
happened
yes.
at Mercury.
This is a little bit different funding level. This is all state funding, but it's a 95.5 match.
Gee, many Christmas. Well, there's no more further questions.
This is great.
This is a no-brainer.
It makes no sense
We
at
hope
all to
everything's
decide whether or not this is a good idea. And not to make it sound like I drive around Murfreesboro all day long, but I go through this section of roadway 4 times a day, and there's
Jeez.
no place for pedestrians, absolutely no place. The people who are riding bicycles are riding in the middle of the roadway. The people who are trying to walk down the side of the road are up and down and everywhere, and this is a great thing, Bill.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second, Ms. Wright.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
I would like to mention there was a letter of recommendation in the package for you to sign, so we can send in with the package.
Okay.
Thank you.
We have agreement number 180111 Mercury Boulevard Phase 2 Transportation Alternative Program, the TAP project between the city and TDOT.
Yes, staff recommends approving the agreement with TDOT for an 80% funding of sidewalk construction. A little background information on this project. Staff, through TDOT's Competitive Transportation Alternative Program, submitted a proposal for a sidewalk project from Mercury Boulevard from Middle Tennessee Boulevard to Apollo Drive. This is actually Phase 2 of the Mercury Boulevard project. The intent of the project is to provide enhanced pedestrian safety by construction of a sidewalk system where none currently exists, separating pedestrians and vehicle traffic along this particular section of roadway. The project also includes incorporation of pedestrian signal elements at signalized intersection. The project length is approximately 3,650 feet, which is almost exactly the same length as Phase 1. The project will also upgrade existing signalized intersections to accommodate pedestrians by installing push buttons, pedestrian signs, and markings. Council priorities: serve safe and livable neighborhoods, strong and sustainable financial and economic health. The physical impact is TAP grant the TAP grant funding provides for 80% of construction costs. Our participation was capped at $1 million due to funds. So the city will be responsible for the additional construction cost and also the PE, NEPA, and utility coordination. TDOT awarded the city this grant request in August of 2018, and the project has been added to the Metropolitan Planning Organization's FY 2017-2020 Transportation Improvement Program. There was a typo in your original handout, and I think we got that to you, but that's a clarification. The funding falls as following. Basically, TDOT will pay $1 million, and based on what we're looking at now, the city's responsibility is about $721,000.
That's right.
The local fund sources will be through city's 2019-2023 capital improvement program, and I'm available for any questions you may have.
It's Minerva and Apollo. I used to live on Apollo. It's over there. Any questions for Mr. Kerr?
Just so it's on record, I rarely ride down Mercury Boulevard, but this sounds like a really good idea.
There's a lot of pedestrian traffic out there.
Yeah. Motion here to pass Minerva.
I'll second it.
Okay.
They may have some. Y'all got questions? Sorry. I second it.
Yeah.
Question 4, we're ready.
No, I was trying to identify. I'd been in this area, and there's a lot of things happening in this area that I think can benefit from this kind of improvement too. So yes.
Sure, Eddie can show you around.
Well, I'd be glad to go with him. So.
Drive you by there 5, 6, 7, 8 times a day.
You've got a second, I'm assuming. Ms. Wright, you'll call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move to, thank you, Mr. Kerr. We'll move to Mr. Blomley, mandatory referral for abandonment of right-of-way along Florence Road.
Thank you, Mayor McFarland. Let me get it pulled up here.
Hey, Matthew, if you don't mind pulling the mic, we're having trouble hearing, so if you don't mind pulling the microphone a little closer. Either that or I'm getting a lot older than I think I am.
Bless your heart.
I thought it may be one of those jokes where someone's sort of talking without talking. So
I will try to speak with proper volume and articulate and enunciate.
Why, thank you, Mr. Blomley.
Our Planning Department's final item tonight is a right-of-way abandonment request submitted by Mr. Chris Bratcher. He purchased the property where this X is last year from the city of Murfreesboro. It is a remnant parcel that was created with the realignment of Florence Road in the early 2000s by TDOT, making the intersection with Florence Road and Broad Street safer. So TDOT acquired right-of-way, and what we have determined is that now, for our present needs, now that it's a city right-of-way, it's excess right-of-way, and so there are three parts to this right-of-way abandonment request. There's this area that curves along the current roadway of Florence Road, and then there is the old right-of-way of Florence Road as it previously was constructed, and then finally there is the old right-of-way of Alexandria Drive. You can see Alexandria Drive up here now intersects with Florence Road further to the north. So these are three areas that staff has identified as excess right-of-way that we no longer need as right-of-way. So Mr. Bratcher has requested the abandonment of these segments of right-of-way. This portion or this parcel that he purchased from the city last year lacks depth. It's a pretty shallow piece of property, and this right-of-way abandonment and the subsequent acquisition by Mr. Bratcher of the excess right-of-way to incorporate into his parcel will help make it more developable, give greater depth to the parcel, and help to get the property on the tax rolls with development rather than just in its vacant state right now. Planning Commission conducted a public hearing on this matter on September 5th and unanimously recommended approval subject to the following four conditions. The applicant shall be required to submit the necessary documents to the legal department required to draft the quitclaim deed. Number two, the applicant shall be responsible for recording the quitclaim deed. Number three, the abandoned right-of-way shall be incorporated into the existing parcel via a subdivision plat recorded at the Register of Deeds office. And number four, utility easements shall be recorded to accommodate existing utilities that are in the right-of-way to be abandoned, including but not limited to sanitary sewer and possibly AT&T. So the Planning Commission recommends the City Council approve this mandatory referral right-of-way abandonment request, and I'll be happy to answer any questions. No public hearing is required before the City Council.
Any questions?
No questions. Yep, second.
Mr. Martin. Mr. Shackler. Ms. Wright, call the roll, please.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance. Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now consider council consent for employment of Kennedy Ryan Martin as lifeguard for the Murfreesboro Parks and Recreation Department. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor, members of council. Some of you know Kennedy Martin as Ronnie Martin's daughter. We know her as a lifeguard. We kind of like to keep it that way. Kennedy began working for Parks and Recreation on April 29th, 2018. City Charter, section number 35 and Employee Handbook, section 5002, require that council approve employment of any relative of a council member by a 2/3 vote. Kennedy is a valued member of our team, does a tremendous job as a lifeguard. It is my recommendation that she be retained.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Ms. Wright, call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Abstain.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. All right, we'll now talk about fees and charges. Mr. Williams.
Yes, Mayor. While preparing the 2018 and 2019 fiscal year budget, you encouraged all of the departments to identify areas that could be adjusted in our fees to be able to better cover costs. Additionally, you expressed a desire when we were able to provide citizen or resident discounts in areas that we could. Attached is a spreadsheet of fee adjustments for your consideration. These fees were determined by evaluating market prices, considering direct costs to deliver program services and facilities, and staff recommendations. You might recall our first iteration of this came last year with facility passes at Sports Common Patterson and was very successful. If approved, these fees will go into effect on December 1st, 2018. I'm glad to present this to you with a unanimous support from the Parks and Recreation Commission, and I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
If there aren't any questions, I'll move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. We'll now move into discussing a long-term use agreement with the Tennessee State Soccer Association. Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mayor. Since opening Richard Siegel Park in 2005, Murfreesboro Parks and Recreation has hosted over 15 tournaments by the Tennessee State Soccer Association. We're recommending that we enter a long-term agreement for 2018, 2019, and 2020 to be held at Richard Siegel Park. This agreement will result in over $25,000 in rental revenue fees just for that facility and estimated to have a $3 million economic impact. I'm glad to present this to you with unanimous support from the Parks and Recreation Commission and would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion second. Ms. Wright, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. Approved to, we're going to move to approval to accept a SAFER grant with Fire and Rescue. Chief.
Mayor and members of council, while I get this pulled up, this is what we're asking for tonight is for you to formally approve the grant that I came before you a couple of weeks ago and mentioned that we were awarded on that particular day. And this grant is going to provide for funding for 27 firefighters with shared content from the city during that time frame. The grant is for $2.84 million. Our estimated share is in the $1.7 million range, but I think there's some things that I can show you in this presentation that you will see that are going to be of benefit to our department long range in the city. This, let's see in the slide presentation here. This grant is what we're looking to do is we need to plan for new stations to keep pace with our city growth. As many of you know, in our capital improvement plan in the next several years, we have plans for 3 new stations out over around a 6-year time frame. It's also to maintain response times in high growth areas to work toward National Fire Protection Association 1710 standard for structure fires, which is a staffing standard through that association, and achieve our primary mission of effective response and public safety. I have a map to show you tonight of our response areas, and this map of the response areas is actually, as you can see, the green area and the Blackman area doesn't exist right now. And if you look at our city limits and where those city limits lie, you see Veterans Parkway to the left-hand side. Station 11, that green area is actually not covered right now. And so what we're looking to do is, through this plan, is to have all of our built-upon structures, or as many as we possibly can get, within a 2.5-mile radius of a fire station. And that's what this map shows that we are trying to achieve through that. And Station 11 and Station 12 on Joe B. Jackson Parkway are the next 2 stations in our pipeline. Station 11 should be going out for bid the first of this coming month, pending legal and purchasing review of the bid documents from our architect and our owner's representative, which are coming very soon. And then we have, additionally beyond that, we have Station 12 in our capital improvement plan for Joe B. Jackson Parkway, and we're working on property acquisition now. The city owns property on Joe B. Jackson, but the property is not deep enough to put a fire station, so we're working through planning and Mr. Whitaker for property alternatives out there. This grant on pro forma staffing, there is pro forma built in for 2020 and 2022 for the addition of 15 firefighters for Station 11 and 2022 for the addition of firefighters for Station 12. That's a total of 30 career firefighters over the 5-year period. This grant would provide the addition of 27 firefighters in this year, in 2019-20 budget year. And some of that will come because of the award date within this budget year. And in 2022, with the addition of 6 firefighters, we could open Station 12. That's a total of 33 firefighters over that 5-year period, instead of the number of 30 firefighters for the other. And there's a chart on the pro forma out on that Mr. Crumley did for me, showing the pro forma that has been projected out and the effect of the SAFER grant on that pro forma. The reason we asked for this grant in the first place was because of National Fire Protection Association's staffing recommendations and response recommendations. The recommendations are based on tasks needed to be performed at a structure fire scene, and research demonstrates that reduced staffing or recommended staffing reduces the likelihood of firefighter injuries and decreases property loss from fire. The recommendation from this standard is a 4-person minimum staffing on all firefighting companies, and the standard for full alarm assignment on a residential structure fire is 14 personnel, 15 personnel if operating an aerial ladder. The mayor mentioned the other night that there was a fire, or the other day at the Joint Task Force meeting, that there was a fire in this neighborhood this past year, and that 4 fire apparatus were there in a very quick amount of time to put that fire out, and that's the reason that we send that many apparatus to those to try to get those numbers on scene as quickly as we can. With that recommendation, currently we're about 6 firefighters short per shift, or 18 total firefighters, of meeting that 4-person minimum staffing requirement on those firefighting apparatus. And we put 3-person minimum staffing on our rescue apparatus. This grant will fund 27 positions, which would provide our minimum staffing of 4 personnel on all those fire apparatus and allow us to open Stations 11 and 12 while only hiring 6 additional personnel other than that supported by the SAFER grant. Future staffing is based on both SAFER and consolidation of some companies. The net impact of doing that is meeting staffing is 3 firefighters above the pro forma, and we're decreasing the size of our fleet by 2 apparatus through consolidation of a couple of our companies, firefighting companies, to achieve this staffing level. So the benefits versus cost of this grant, our fiscal impact to our current budget is $460,856. This would be presented to you as a future budget amendment by Ms. Wright. That part of that is for the match for salaries and benefits this year during our period of performance that is occurring during this fiscal year, and $205,000 of that is essentially a one-time training cost for the training, uniforms, and personal protective equipment that would be in the budget. 33 positions needed for opening the 2 stations and meet the recommended staffing has a fiscal impact of $153,006 above the current pro forma that's scheduled out. And our fleet decreases by 2 apparatus by making the moves and adjustments that are making by consolidating companies. I'm free to answer any questions, but it is our recommendation that we accept the SAFER grant and accept the funding from this grant and the benefits that it would provide our department. I'm free to answer any questions you may have.
So, Chief Folks, what's the total value then of the grant? It's going to cost us $460,000 to take the money?
Well, yeah, that is our portion of the salary and benefits for this fiscal year time frame. This actual budget year. The total impact of the grant over the 3-year period is $2.84 million, $2,840,000, and that's a 75% of salary and benefits the first 2 years of the grant, 35% of salary and benefits the third year of the grant. During that time frame, we will be opening Station 11. We anticipate, even with an October bid date, that Station 11 will be opening in July, maybe early August of next year, 2019, which would be in the following fiscal year. But that station would be open and those positions would be in use at that station. And the pro forma would be in effect at that point.
Trying to get my hands around, what we already know. We've talked about that kind of those tail items on our CIP, and this kind of looks like this might have a little bit of a tail cost to it. Do we know if we were to say right now, notwithstanding this whole grant discussion, if we just said right now over the next 4 years, what kind of increase in cost are we going to have this year, next year, year 3, and year 4, to open the new stations, to do what we're going to do, versus what's going to be our cost by doing it this way? I see that we got some benefits, we got perhaps more folks, but what's going to be our overall cost, and then how do we compare that to how this?
The pro forma had the opening of Station 11 and Station 12 already built into it, with the 15 employees that would be required to staff each station. So there's a $750,000 adjustment in the pro forma for 2020 and another $750,000 adjustment in 2022. So we had a significant amount of money already built into our model. What you see on the graphic, and I don't know if I'll put it back up on the screen, each of the first 3 years of the grant, the city actually saves money versus the pro forma. This is using the SAFER grant to replace costs of firefighters we were going to employ anyway to open Station 11 and Station 12. It only begins to cost the city in year 4, the 2023 years. In those first 4 years, there's a little over a $700,000 savings for the city while being completely staffed to operate 11 and 12 and to have some residual left over to beef up the rescue units. It would be year 8 where the actual costs of the SAFER grant would catch up and our cumulative would go into an increase rather than a decrease in what we have in the pro forma.
So in the pro forma, though, and I'm sorry, I understand that part of it, but in the pro forma, we used the same number of employees that the grant calls for. That's not necessarily what we would have done.
The pro forma has 30 total employees over the 5-year period, where with the SAFER grant we would have 33 employees over the 5-year period. That's basically why we're $150,000 more expensive once the grant runs out, is we've got those 3 additional people that we hadn't originally projected.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, one thing that's just important. I think obviously if this is something that we're going to be doing over the next 8 years, we might as well have it sooner rather than later. I think it kind of goes without saying, but it is kind of eye-opening to know what that total cost is on opening a fire station. It's a big number.
Yes, sir.
Employees and apparatus and all that is a big number. So anyway, all right, that's good. I just didn't have a real good grasp on that right quick.
Any other questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Wrightville, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have the contract with for the city attorney in front of you. Are there any questions?
Move for approval.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Scales Harris.
Vice Mayor Scales Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Aye.
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. You have several licensing items.
We do. We have some beer permits for your consideration tonight. We have a restaurant taking the location of a former restaurant at 1714 Old Fort Parkway. We also have a restaurant taking the location of a former restaurant at 1824 Old Fort Parkway. Both of those have met our requirements except for their final building codes inspections. I believe one of those might have met that requirement today. We also have a special event permit for Read to Succeed on November the 8th that they would like to have their special event permit. We also recommend approval of that, and we would issue those that have met all the requirements once they've met them if you approve them tonight. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
Any questions?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and second. Ms. Shriver, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Skels Harris.
Aye.
Mr. LaLance.
Who's at the
Mr. Martin.
Aye.
Mr. Shacklet.
Aye.
Mr. Smotherman.
Aye.
Mr. Wade.
Aye.
Mayor McFarland.
Aye. For a future council meeting, recommending reappointments for Mr. Harold Yoakley, Mr. Philip Seagroves, and Mr. Rick Sane to the Gateway Commission. That'll be at our next meeting. Do we have any statements that need to be paid?
No, sir.
Any other business? I have one item, please. Mr. Tyndall, I want to ask if we could, and I'm not sure how we have to do this, but I want to ask that, looking over the council, board, and commission appointments, and that's where the lion's share of the work is done inside the city, I want to ask that we come up with a plan to be able to compensate the member for the school board who represents the council. That the ex officio member of that school board is the only person it's a paid board and doesn't get paid and is at every single meeting and spends a ton of time. And then I also would like to ask that with everything that we have going on with water and sewer, that we look at adding 2 council members to the water and school board, the water and school board, the water and sewer resources board. I talked with Mr. Gore about that and the complexity of what they were dealing with and the amount that comes back to the council. He also recommended that could be something that could be beneficial.
Okay, we'll take a look at those.
And then
No
we can
problem.
discuss that when it comes back to us.
Absolutely. We about to adjourn? I have
That's
one.
all I had, yes.
Good. It is the first week of October is fall break, and so want to see if there's enough members that are going to be around to hold a meeting on that date. We had planned on a meeting, but if people are going to be out of town, then we'll
What's
do
the date?
alternative. It's the
Fourth?
first week of October, I believe.
October 4th?
4th, yeah.
I was planning on riding around that week.
Just driving around.
Sidewalk.
Yeah.
I'll be
Excellent.
That's funny.
All right. Well, we'll go ahead and schedule a meeting then for the 4th, or the week of the 4th, whatever Thursday that is.
I'm unlikely
To
be here.
be here? Okay. We'll get some things done then.
Also, Mr. Wade.
Kurt's
Oh, Kurt's going to be gone too?
It's just, if there's,
we can not hold a meeting on that week, and then we'll
Pick up
catch
on the
up towards
11th.
the end of the month. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
And I think Rick LaLance may have an announcement to make, something to do with soccer maybe.
Yeah, I just want to congratulate the Siegel Lady Stars over my alma mater, Oakland High School Lady Patriots, 2-1. Way to go, Allison LaLance.
You can go home now.
So if you heard me go, woo, earlier, that was what it was all about.
Is that?
Got the text.
Excellent.
Winner, winner, chicken dinner.
It's a good thing the election's over with. He wouldn't do very well in Oakland district right now, I don't think.
Proud of Oakland, too.
Yeah, that's right.
All right. Seeing no other business, we will stand adjourned.
Get some air. I love it.